Hi everyone and welcome to the review time. My name is Graeme. Today we're going to review one of the absolute best death metal albums, Vile, by the band Cannibal Corpse. Let's check it out. In 1996, American death metal band Cannibal Corpse released their fifth studio album, Vile. This album was a strong step forward for the band for both their creativity and placement on American album charts. Vile included the brutal lineup of Paul Mazurkiewicz, Rob Barrett, Jack Owens and Alex Webster, but with a very evident and outrageous twist, an imposing titan-necked behemoth known as Corpse Grinder. This album was to be a major milestone for the band, with many changes due to take place during and after the album's production and later release. Originally titled Created to Kill, the album was part complete by founder vocalist Chris Barnes. Due to what can be understood as creative differences, an axe was driven between Barnes and the rest of the band, with the possible decline of Chris's abilities and the band's increased technical competencies and potential on the rise. He was not willing to work with us, Mazurkiewicz expressed while speaking on the Centuries of Torment DVD, with Barnes following up with, "Things just kept getting weirder and weirder between us." After a tumultuous start and frustration in the year, Barnes left to go on tour with his other band, 6 Feet Under. With what was a debatable mutual agreement within the band, Barnes was out. Names for a replacement were being thrown around, with Barrett recommending a Baltimore resident and monstrosity vocalist George Fisher, aka Corpse Grinder, to take the spot. With Corpse Grinder Fisher at the helm, Cannibal Corpse released Vile to an overwhelmingly positive response from fans, embracing the new guy, taking over Barnes, and the album placing at 150th in the Billboard 200. This was to be a first for the band, as well as the death metal genre as a whole. There are definitely fans loyal to Barnes, but they're unable to refute the extreme guttural talents of the 6'1" mountain of a man. Further changes would take place following the release, with Barrett growing more and more irritated with ongoings in the band, and producer Scott Burns leaving the industry again due to internal frustrations. Enter the gun-toting Shredmeister Pat O'Brien to fulfill the duties of guitarist. This album would mark the last outing with long-standing producer Scott Burns, who had worked with Cannibal Corpse since their debut album Eaten Back to Life in 1990. In these 6 years, the band had released 5 albums, with each release being heavier and more brutal than the last. In this album, the drums were more rounded off and full-bodied, the guitars are clearer and more pronounced, along with the bass sounding smoother and prominent. The strength of the instrumental musicianship was at an all-time high in 1996 with Vile, and the extreme vocals of Fisher being the icing on the evil cake. The album begins with the manic Devoured by Vermin, the infamous 4-count with Mazurkiewicz hammering the toms, followed by frantic riffing and one of the most brutal death metal screams in metal history. This was Fisher's introduction to the fans and left the people wanting more. Luckily, Cannibal Corpse continued to deliver with the heart-pounding, mummified and barbed wire, the pleasing and delicious grooves of Disfigured, and the technical proficiency of the instrumental track Relentless Beating. You cannot talk about Cannibal Corpse album without discussing the ambitious, impressively grotesque and awe-inspiring art of Vincent Locke. Locke, who has worked on such comics as Judge Dredd, has provided the album cover art for the band since their inception in 1990. Each design added a new level and depth of the music, providing a visual stimulus to accompany the savagery of the music. Arguably Cannibal Corpse's heaviest album to date was released amidst a slew of pop, grunge and more accessible heavy rock, which included Slang by Def Leppard, Nickelback's Curb and Metallica's Load, all being released this year. Pantera would follow on and release The Great Southern Trendkill, which is debatably Pantera's heaviest album released at this point. Cannibal Corpse have truly stood the test of time with their ever-evolving sound, musical abilities and unwavering attitude and devotion to the music and scene they love. They have stayed devoted to the fans and provided great entertainment, either with the music and included artwork, or inadvertent controversy they seem to generate. Cannibal Corpse set a new standard for death metal that can still be felt today with the release of Vile, and set a new industry standard and stick to be measured against. On a personal note, I've been a fan of Cannibal Corpse since the release of Kill in 2006. I sometimes find it hard to take the albums previously released by a band when I'm so heavily attracted to their recent releases. This was somewhat the case with Cannibal Corpse. I'm a huge fan of The Wretched Spawn in 2004 and Bloodthirst in 1999. When backtracking and I arrived at Vile, my whole attitude to the band changed with their history that is attached to them. This further prompted me to dig deeper into their discography, and I'm pleased to do so as I finally arrived at their 1990 debut. There's a noticeable difference between the two eras of the band, with Barnes' raw vocals and undeniable crowd engagement in early stages to Corpse Grinder's punishing and bone-crushing stage presence and vocal talent. Of Cannibal Corpse's 14 studio albums, Vile definitely ranks high with Kill and Evisceration Plague being top contenders, and the recent release of Red Before Black is a true stroke of musical ingenuity. Vile is a well-rounded, fast-paced and unwavering album, with the intense vocals of Fisher, the deep, full-bodied low ends provided by Webster and Mazurkowitz, accompanied by the frenzy-inducing dual guitars of Owens and Barrett. Vile is a devastating, thrilling and exhilarating ride you owe yourself as a metal fan to devour, with the artwork and production adding to the overall enjoyment. Based on this, I gave Vile by Cannibal Corpse a 9 out of 10.